Hi, I am Anna Martin, and this is the Flex Podcast. It would help if I got that out as a sentence, wouldn't it? So today we're talking about losing weight, and I want to start by just making sure that we all know what that means, and also not everyone who's listening to this podcast wants to lose weight, and that's absolutely fine. But a lot of people come to me for that reason, or they start by coming to me for that reason. So that's something that we're going to talk about now. Obviously, as time goes on, potentially for a lot of people, the weight matters less because they're feeling stronger, they're moving better, they feel happier in themselves, they're more confident anyway. And that's brilliant. But for some people still, the weight loss is important at different times in their life. And that's why I want to make sure that I deal with everything that my clients want to know, not just everything skippy and happy, if that makes sense. I want you all to feel more confident. I want you to feel great in with who you are. I want you to feel strong and brilliant and all of those things. We don't need to lose weight to do that. But for those who do want to do it, this is a discussion for you. Okay, so what is the difference between losing weight and losing body fat? So when we talk about losing weight, it is any weight of your body. So that will be some stored body fat. It'll also be maybe some muscle mass if we're not eating enough. It might be the stored carbohydrates in our muscle, the water those carbohydrates are stored in, the amount of food in our body at any given time. That's always something. So when we talk about weight loss, it is an overall term that we use for any weight that we are losing from our body. In contrast, when we talk about fat loss, we are talking about losing stored body fat from our body. So we want to maintain or gain our more lean muscle mass so that we maintain the amount of muscle that we have in our body or gain some, and at the same time, or in different phases, lose the body fat rather than lose muscle mass and so on and so on, as we would with the overall term of losing weight. Now, why that's important is because obviously for most people, when you say I want to lose weight, you actually mean you want to lose body fat and appear more toned. So you want to have more visible muscle mass or whatever. And I'm not talking about being a bodybuilder. I'm just talking about like a natural physique on a person. So how we retain more lean mass, so more of our muscle mass, is to eat higher protein and make sure we're resistance training whilst we are in this calorie deficit. Calorie deficit is just eating slightly less than we need to currently maintain our body weight. So when we first start going on a diet or whatever you want to call it, most people lose faster at the start. And this is because at the start, we tend to lose some body fat, but general weight more in that first week or so. And that is because as soon as you cut your calories as soon as you cut any calories, you're probably likely to be also cutting slightly the amount of carbohydrate that you eat, because proportionally that would happen. So not only do we have less food in our body, so that weight there is deducted from the figure, but we also have less stored carbohydrate in our body because we're using the amount of stored carbohydrate we have as fuel. That carbohydrate is stored in water, so then we also lose that weight as well. So when you first go on a diet, in inverted commas, we tend to see more come off in that first week. That can be very motivating, but it's really important just to understand why that happens, because when it reduces, and it will, it can then feel very demotivating for that to happen. But actually, fat loss, again, is different to weight loss, is slower and will happen very slowly over time. So for most people, if we're looking at an average person needing to be in a slight calorie deficit, probably looking around that 0.5 to 1 kilogram per week in loss. Probably most people come in somewhere in the middle of that, I'd say. Most of the women that I work with, somewhere around there. Obviously, how much you lose depends on the degree of deficit that you're in. But I would say generally, unless there is a due date that this needs to be done for, like for some people, it could be that you need to have an operation. It has to be done by then. So unless there is a due date that's very important, we might want to look at potentially doing it over time. So we have the time to build up the habits to make this a lifestyle and to make this a change that we're able to maintain for a longer period of time. Okay, so if we're, we've lost a couple of pounds or whatever, and now it seems to have slowed down, we're no longer losing weight at all. Why is that happening? And for the most part, that will be because we are at what we call maintenance calories. So we are eating the amount that we need to exist. That's our maintenance calories. That means that we're not in a deficit. If we're not gaining weight and we're not losing weight, we're neither in a surplus nor a deficit, we're at maintenance. Now, if you are very keen to reduce your weight and your body fat, we need to then put you in a deficit. So it means a slight calorie reduction. However, if we're at maintenance and we are doing things like lifting heavy, or we're at maintenance or in a very slight deficit whereby we're not really seeing any change in scale weight over shorter periods of time, it's not always the worst thing in the world, because if we're lifting heavy, we're also going to be building muscle at the same time. And that may mean that we're losing small amounts of body fat that we can't measure very well, because we're also gaining muscle at the same time. So that's a change in our body composition, which, if we're looking at the fact that we wanted to lose body fat rather than lose weight, is quite important, right? Because I think for a lot of people, maybe we wouldn't care what we weighed if we felt strong and we were happy in ourselves and all those kind of things. So it's just important to be able to reflect on what we actually want when we're asking for it, and what might change along that journey. So it might be at the beginning that you're like, I just want to lose weight. That's all I care about. And as you get into it, you're like, actually, my weight loss is moderately less important to me now, because actually I want to be more muscular, stronger. I want to be fitter. I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do that. And we're able to break it down a bit more as to why and how our original goal may have changed and what it actually means to us right now. So just because we have an overall goal of weight loss over a period of time doesn't mean that we can't understand what's happening to us in periods where we may not see as many changes on the scale. We also need to recognize the natural cycles of a woman. So weight loss for anyone fat loss for anyone doesn't tend to be completely linear, because obviously every week is very different. It's also very different if you're a girl, because we're at different points in our cycle. We might have more water retention. Our energy requirements can go up a little bit at different times of the month. We might feel more bloated. This is where we do need to take a step back and say, actually, am I tracking my symptoms on my period app? Do I know when I am most likely to, for example, feel bloated, feel swollen and manky, and then you think, oh my God, I'm putting weight on. Yeah, you might be, but you're bloated. It's not actual body fat. You're bloated. You're retaining water. The water weighs something. That is what it's coming down to at the end of the day. And this is, again, something we just need to be aware of, because what you can find quite often is that someone will say to me, oh, I haven't lost this week. In fact, I've put 2 kilos on. I'm like, have you though? Because that's just you being bloated, because you're literally due on next week. So we take a reality check, and it's important to be able to take a step back from that and actually not then just be like, oh, well, I've put all this weight on, so I may as well not bother. And actually your new healthier lifestyle, where you're trying to eat better and move more and all that, is more important than just giving it up because we had 1 week where we feel bloated and feel like we put on weight, but actually we haven't, because we're just due on and feeling manky. And then we come to this bit where there's this kind of falling off the wagon vibe. If you are eating a really restrictive diet during the week or for a period of time, you then get to a point where you feel like you're going to fall off the wagon, like you need to just go out and have a splurge and do this and that. And that is absolutely do it if you want to. Like, this is the thing. Everyone's going to live their life how they want to live it. That's great. And we all do it. Like, I went out Saturday and had a fantastic time. But it's this on and off the wagon mentality that I want to try to get rid of with my clients. Because if we are only happy when we are losing weight and ticking all these boxes and being this perfect human, that isn't sustainable long term. What is better overall for a long term feeling fitter and healthier and potentially losing some body fat is to be consistent over time. And that doesn't mean we have to be the same every day. It just means we need to be generally consistent. So over the week, we're generally eating pretty healthily. We might be going out for dinner once or going out for drinks or whatever, but our training is still happening. Eating more healthily on the other days is still happening. And again, healthily is a crap word because there's no food that's like good or bad for you on its own. It's just what we do with our life in general is more important. So we want to eat nutrient dense foods as much as we can, lots of veggies, lots of protein, all this stuff. But going out on a Saturday night and having a nice time with our friends doesn't have to be the be all and end all of everything. Likewise, it doesn't have to be a giant binge. We don't need to drink 15 units in one night and eat 3 takeaways because we've restricted ourselves so much that we can't control ourselves. So it's trying to find that balance where we're generally having this really nice, consistent lifestyle where we're able to maintain the stuff we're doing. We're gradually changing our habits and working on them. And so we don't feel like this horrible, strict wagon that we're going to fall off. So things that we can do if we're consistently not seeing that needle move is the first thing I would say is to get real and just start to kind of drill down into who we are and what we've got going on. So one, we talked already about the natural cycles of a woman. So that's definitely something that we have to consider in this situation. Secondly, fat loss for anyone isn't linear. It's especially not for women. And consistency over time is key and is especially with resistance training. So we want to be consistent over that time. We have to ask ourselves, are we actually in a deficit? And this is where we need to maybe be a bit more introspective, because it can be that we eat a lot of what we consider to be very healthy foods. So it might be that you are literally eating a lettuce and cucumber and some chicken for your lunch, which I would say, I mean, that might be your idea of heaven. And if it is, please do enjoy it. But that to me sounds like it's a wagon type meal. So it's something we think is really healthy, so we're going to make ourselves do it. But actually, it doesn't make us feel very satiated once we've eaten it. It's maybe not that tasty. It's maybe a bit boring. It feels like a wagon food that we're not going to be consistently able to keep up. Whereas if we make that a bit more interesting, maybe it's got a few more calories in it, fills us up more, we're able then to resist the wagon feeling. We don't need as many snacks. We're not going for the vending machine in the afternoon. We didn't need a bucket of mayonnaise to wash it down with, whatever. So actually, we need to think, are we actually in that deficit over a time period rather than starving ourselves during the day and then getting home and being absolutely unable to control ourselves? It's better to be able to balance our calories over a day, enjoy the food that we're eating, build a good relationship with our food. We don't want to feel like we are on a diet, like we all did it. I'm sure we all did it back in the 90s and so on, when we did this horrendous restrictive diet. That's not what we want here. We're trying to make a balanced diet in a slight calorie deficit that we can maintain, that we enjoy, that we have some flexibility in with our social life and so on. So are we actually in a deficit? Where could we be slipping up? Because for some people, it's things like drinks. So like calorie increase, you can easily increase your calories by drinking drinks that have got lots of calories in that don't necessarily make you feel that satiated once you've had them in terms of your hunger levels. It could be that we're eating food not to waste it. And I had this chat with a chap I spoke to at a nutrition seminar I was delivering recently, and he said he knows that he eats a lot of protein. He actually eats a lot of fruit and veg and things that people consider to be healthy, but he just hoovers the rest of the food that his kids left because he doesn't want to waste them. And he knows that is the main reason why he's not feeling in the shape that he wants to feel in, is because he looks at it and he's like, I cannot waste this food. I'm just going to eat it all. And actually it's probably the amount of energy in a meal once he's eaten off the plate of two. I think he said he had 2 children. So once he's eaten like the food they've left, like 2 halves of a plate or whatever, it's probably the size of a small meal. So he knows he's not in a deficit that he wants to be in when he's doing that. So that's an easy change in terms of it's a simple change. It might not be easy for him to do, but it's a simple change that he can implement straight away. This person also said to me that he drinks alcohol most days. So again, that would be an easy switch for him to switch to alcohol-free lager or to soft drinks, calorie-free soft drinks or whatever. So again, not easy for him to do because he likes doing that every night, but simple in terms of there's two things he can implement straight away without him really having to look intensely at his diet to be able to do that. And that can be something that we maybe need to look at with ourselves a bit. So, for example, if I look at myself, I can easily say one area is the fact that I love a table sauce. So I almost can't cope if I don't have a table sauce on my food. So if I wanted to be in a calorie deficit, that would be a really easy switch for me in terms of simple, not easy because I really like eating them, but having a simple switch for me would be maybe don't eat, 100 grams of Nando's Péronnaise with every meal. That would be an easy switch, right? So there are things that we can probably look at within what we do within ourselves. Likewise, for a lot of people, I know it's evening snacking. So it could be that maybe you need to look at the way that you are, your habits, how you structure your days, and where you're most likely to lose the ability to keep control of what you're doing. For some people, it's like evening snacking. So you prepare for that and you get in some snacks that are maybe slightly lower in calories. Maybe you don't have access to as many of the things that you really want to eat more of, or you're able to limit it a bit more by buying slightly different size portions of them. Even like with chocolate, maybe we don't bring out the family sharing bar for two people, and instead we have a bar that we have in the cupboard that's a portion and we know it is, and then we can just bring those out. So it can be really simple things that we can, I know I use this again, easily change. I mean, it's not easy when it's a habit. We have to put effort in to undo it. But simple things that we can make changes with. And also need to be a little bit kind of aware of the fact that we all have different calorie needs to potentially our friends and our partners. Now, if you're a taller person, your calorie needs will be higher than your shorter friends. So if you're a shorter, more petite woman, your calorie needs are going to be lower. And if your partner's 6'2" and you're 5 foot, your calorie needs are going to be very different from one another. And that can be quite difficult because when you look at their plate versus your plate, they have a lot more food and it looks great and you have a lot less. That which can suck a bit. And it's something that maybe we need to get used to. Maybe it's something we need to adapt to. And also we can do little tricks like adding more vegetables to our plate so it looks fuller, despite the fact that theirs is like a mountain of carbohydrate. Also, it comes down to what do we do for work? So a lot of people might say something like, I have a really active job because they are standing in their office or at their desk quite a lot, but you're not moving that much. Obviously, you're moving more than someone who sits completely still all day, but that maybe isn't a completely active job. Not like someone who's like cutting down trees or fitting bathrooms or throwing a javelin. I can't think of anything else active. I don't know why I thought of that. I do. But yes, if you're not throwing a javelin for a living, then we just need to have that reflection of like, we are relatively active in our job and we move as much as we can, but we're not as active as our partner who is a professional javelin thrower or something. And we're not as active as that person. They're also taller than us. So therefore our calorie needs are different to theirs. So when they want to get a takeaway that night, maybe for us that makes it a bit more difficult, because if we're a shorter woman, smaller person, and our overall calorie goal is like, let's say 1,600 calories a day, 1,500 calories a day, but we're a small person and that our partner wants to get a takeaway and that takeaway is going to come in at 1,100 calories a person, that's a really, really hard for us to balance. That's not to say we shouldn't do it, but if we're doing that nightly, that's going to have an effect on how we're reaching that energy balance for ourselves. So it's just worth having a little think about ourselves and being aware of who we are and what we do. Likewise, if your friends who you hang around with, You might be the most active person out of all of your friends. You might regularly hit your 6,500 calories, 6.5 steps a day, calories a day, your 6,500 steps a day. You might go to do dance fitness once a week, and you might go to the gym once a week, and you might be the most active person out of everyone that you know. So therefore, you will feel like you are due or owed more calories than some of your more sort of still friends who maybe aren't doing anything. And maybe that's true, obviously dependent on height and what we do for a job and all of that kind of stuff. But we're all very different beings. And actually, sometimes when we are one of the fitter people out of a group of very unfit people, we can think that maybe we're due more, and it's not working for us because maybe in our heads we're like, well, I should be able to eat more than this because I do more than them. But then on reflection, if our friends are much, much fitter than us, so then if you then compare your energy output to someone who's training 5 times a week, doing 10,000 steps and 4 cardio sessions, obviously that energy need would be quite different. So sometimes it's just taking that self-awareness as well to say, yes, I am much more active than my colleagues or my friends, and I'm very proud of myself for doing that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a huge difference between our energy requirements, because whilst I am moving more, perhaps I'm not moving as much as I think I am. Just being able to have that reflection on ourselves and where we're at. Then we come on to things like our sleep pattern. Your sleep is really important. So one, if you're drinking alcohol every night, you need to stop. And I won't ever really say that about anything, but it affects your ability to be in your REM sleep, your deep sleep. Being able to be in deep sleep improves the regulation of your hunger hormones the next day. Also, we know that if we're hungover, our ability to stay away from happy carbohydrates and stuff is much harder for us anyway. So alcohol, try and bin it off at least 4 nights of the week. Make sure you're getting a good amount of sleep so that your hunger hormones can regulate themselves the next day. We want to try to get better at managing our own stress. And you might be like, but my life is very stressful. And sometimes there are life events that happen that we cannot change, like people dying and moving house and things like that are very stressful. But there are other times when we can manage our stress better. So if we are finding ourselves very stressed about smaller things that perhaps we notice other people aren't getting so stressed about, we might need to look at the way that we manage our stress a little bit, because that is going to help us in terms of our overall health and indeed some of the food choices we make and so on. We also want to look at the quality of the food that we're eating. So, nutrient-rich foods, your fruit and veg intake, your fibre intake, lovely protein sources. Maybe we're stepping away from I love breaded chicken, by the way, so I'm not saying this to slag off breaded chicken, but maybe sometimes we're stepping away from the breaded chicken and we're moving towards trying to have a piece of oily fish because we know it's very good for us with all the lovely, beautiful fats in there that we know that we need for our bodies. So we can have a look at the quality of food that we're eating. And also when it comes to, this is like a kind of spin-off conversation, but when it comes to calories, lots of us do track our calories in some way. You don't have to, by the way, but lots of people do. And it's not an exact science because it's not. We don't 100% ever know your calorie requirements. It is an educated formula or guess that we're using to work that out. And we don't ever 100% know exactly how many calories are in that food, but they have a estimated and good and well-educated guess on the packet. And that gives us some idea of what we're tracking. So when you see things saying, oh yeah, but the calorie value can be completely different compared to the food label. Yes, that is true. But we have a good educated guess on the packet and that we know for ourselves. So for some people, that can still be very helpful way of tracking and giving us that general information that we need to hopefully hit our calorie goals. Also with your food choices, obviously it's much harder to eat 1,500 calories worth of broccoli than it is to eat 1,500 calories worth of a burger and chips. 1,500 calories of broccoli would be so boring and so much food that we would probably cry. When you look at a burger and chips, which probably comes in between 1,100 and 1,300 calories, it can be really difficult. It wouldn't be very difficult to eat. It's difficult to imagine not being able to eat that, if that makes sense. So when you're looking, as we talked about before, at your plate, shoving in some extra veg makes the food quantity look more, bulks it up, but isn't actually increasing the calories that much. That can be a very helpful tool for people when they're eating. Also, it's much more colourful. It's got much more nutrients. We are able to get that full spectrum of the nutrients that we need. So how we can make it viable for us is to make sure we have a fist-sized portion of protein in every meal. And it increase our vegetable intake and our plate will look fuller. We'll look at the times of day where we might struggle and create options that help us to facilitate our goals. We're going to be introspective about the things that we do, how we deal with things, maybe when there are triggers for us and things that we need to potentially look at, and start to look at the way that we work around dieting in inverted commas. Because if you have that old school dieting approach where you're literally going to eat this horrendous meal plan for like 6 weeks because the only thing that matters to you is losing weight, potentially over time, that might not be the best thing for you. When we look at all those older style diets, actually want to create balance, create a life that we can be consistent with and we can enjoy. And not just because at the moment, maybe we want to lose some weight, but because we want those habits in the future for future us. We want to eat well. We want to live well for the people around us. We want to feel stronger. We want to feel fitter. We want to feel healthier. These are the things that really matter ultimately. And yes, for some people, fat loss and weight loss can be very important at a particular time. Not just for people who maybe have aesthetic goals, but health-wise, some people may need to get some weight off for health-related goals. And it is really important that we're able to work on that as well. But overall, over time, we want to feel good and feel healthy, feel mobile and energetic. And in order to do that, it's good to be able to do this in a sustainable way for most people. And that it doesn't mean that for some people we might not need to use other weight loss tools. That's not me slagging them off in the slightest. But even when we're doing that, using other weight loss tools, we also need to build a healthier lifestyle. So we want to maintain it later. So we will always be looking at ourselves and our lifestyle and what we can do to change it alongside any other interventions that we may have chosen to use at this point. So in general, I try to talk to my clients a lot about not having anything that's off the menu, not trying to bar certain foods, not saying I'm never going to eat this again, never going to do this again. Sometimes doing that can be worse because it's like, I'm never eating this again, so I'm going to eat loads of it this weekend to make sure I get loads of this in. And then on Monday, I'm giving it up. Now, by the time we get to Friday, we haven't given it up because now we're going to have it that night. So then we go, we're going to start again on Monday. And then we smash it in, this particular food, for 3 days because we think, oh, shit, I'm giving this up on Monday. I'm not going to be able to cope. And the cycle continues. Whereas if we don't try to eliminate something and instead we say, I am just not going to smash this food in for 3 days solid. Instead, I'm going to have small amounts of it when I really want to. Then that can work for a lot of people a lot better rather than trying to eliminate something and be too strict. Because overall, yes, we may have these kind of quite strict goals that we want to meet at this point. But over time, we want to be healthier. And that is why we don't want to eliminate things too much, create this wagon feeling, and instead we try to build habits and build that consistency and that flexibility for us to be able to make choices within our life without following a super restrictive diet, but also have a normal social life and fuel our body better at the same time. For some people that can be a huge battle, because if our diet is particularly lacking in nutrients to begin with, can feel like quite the journey to get there. But small things, small wins, small steps at a time, and being able to have that introspection that actually, no, someone that maybe we think eats all this food and all this stuff, and well, if they're doing it, it's all right for me, kind of thing. That perhaps maybe we are looking at them from our rose tinted glasses, and perhaps they are actually doing a lot more than they say they're doing, but because it's natural to them and easier for them at this point, because they're the habits they've already built, they're not able to vocalize with you how much effort it took them to get there, and how much effort they had to put in to get there in terms of like quality of food and things like that, in terms of making sure they are eating. Maybe they're eating 8 portions of fruit and veg a day, but to them, that is easy. So they don't talk about it to you. But actually, maybe that's something that you need to work on, because currently you're getting 1 in. But they just, your friend is unable to vocalize that because they don't know that it might be difficult for someone, because for them it's natural. Does that make sense? So it's almost like, just because other people might not be able to tell us exactly what they're doing doesn't mean they're not doing it, and doesn't mean they're making a lot of effort to do this stuff, even though it looks like they're eating a lot of food around us, or it looks like they're not really doing any exercise, or it looks like this. Sometimes people aren't able to communicate with us in the way that we would hope in order to have the information, if that makes sense. So we need to be able to generally look at that picture. Right, I feel like I've been talking about this for ages, but always, as ever, do come at me with any questions that you might have. And if you want to join me on Flex, you know where I am, annamartinfitness.co.uk. Thank you for listening.